Hi everyone, it's Belle from Belle's World of Books. Today I'm going to read you a story from the Forgotten Fairy Tales of Brave and Brilliant Girls. Hope you enjoy it. This one's called The Daring Princess. There are princesses and then there are princesses. The princesses swan around in palaces making gowns out of silk and gossamer, or they sit in towers and sing to bluebirds while dreaming of being rescued. Bessie knew she definitely didn't want to be that kind of princess. The other kind of princess is much more ordinary. These princesses have royal parents and live in palaces and sew and sing, but not to bluebirds. They are very polite and good, and always have spotlessly clean clothes. Bessie knew she didn't want to be that kind of the princess either. Bessie was happiest in the stables, grooming her old pony, or chatting to the royal blacksmith, watching him at work. Over her skirts she kept a tool belt. She knew how to pick a lock, make a horseshoe, and even forge a sword. But Bessie's parents were increasingly unhappy that their daughter was turning out to be such an unusual princess. Just that morning, her mother had asked when she was going to start learning to sew, and her father complained that she wasn't behaving as a princess should. "And don't think we approve of your tool belt," added our mother. "It's not ladylike, and it's definitely not princess-like." Then her parents had sighed and looked disappointed, and muttered things about duty and changing her ways. Bessie had a horrible feeling that her days of gallivanting around the castle grounds were numbered. Soon her parents were going to make her start sewing and singing and ban her visits to the blacksmith. That thought had made her want to get as far away from the castle as possible. She had fled to the royal forest, and now she was lost. Bessie looked around, hoping to find a tree or a path she recognised, but she had never been so deep in the forest before, and she had no idea where she was. And all the time the sky grew darker, and she tried very hard not to think of prowling wolves and what might lie hidden in the shadows. At last, after hours of wandering, she came across a tiny wooden cottage with a thatched roof and a little crooked chimney. With luck, Bessie thought, whoever lives here can help me get home. She knocked 3 times, but there was no answer, only a strange muffled sound like a voice calling from far away. "Hello?" Bessie said, and the muffled sound came again. She lifted the latch and the door swung open. The cottage had just one room, and it appeared to be empty. There was a wooden chair in the corner, a faded rug on the floor, and bunches of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. On the worktop she could see a pestle and mortar for grinding, and shelves lined with glass bottles which glowed green and purple and amber. In the middle of the room was a very large and rather rusty iron stove. "Help!" said a voice from inside the stove. "I'm trapped in here. Please, let me out." Bessie darted forward and then stopped. She looked again at the glowing glass bottles and saw they were full of curious things like frogs' legs, eyeballs, and a green snake twisted and coiled. "I must be in a witch's cottage," cried Bessie. "You are!" cried the muffled voice from the stove. "Then how do I know you're not an evil spirit, or a gremlin, or a troll?" asked Bessie. "I'm not. I'm a prince," said the little voice. "Prince Alfred." There's a tiny crack halfway down. "You can see for yourself." Bessie bent down and peered through the crack. "Goodness!" she cried, for there inside the stove was a rather squished-looking young man. "Definitely not a gremlin or a troll," thought Bessie. "You poor thing," she said out loud. "Don't worry, I'll get you out." She took a knife from a tool belt and began to scrape away at the iron stove until there was a small hole. hurry, said Prince Alfred. Please hurry. The witch may come back at any moment. Bessie kept going, even though her fingers were sore and her arms ached, until the hole was big enough for the prince to reach out his arm, and then a leg. Only a little more, pleaded the prince. Bessie wept as the night drew in, and the moon came out, until at last the prince stood free. Thank you for rescuing me, he said. I owe you my life. A witch had trapped me here until our wedding day. She said only a princess could save me. Well, she was right, said Bessie, returning her knife to her tool belt. I am a princess. You're quite an unusual princess, said Prince Alfred, staring at the belt. I've never met a princess before who carries tools with her. Bessie sighed. You sound just like my parents. They don't think being unusual is a good thing for a princess. They want me to learn to sing beautifully and make cushion covers. But Prince Alfred was smiling. Only an unusual princess could have saved me, he said. I'm very grateful it was you who found me. No amount of sewing would have freed me from this stove. The prince opened his mouth as if he were about to speak again, but at that moment the cottage door swept open. A foul-smelling green wind howled its way into the little room. When it cleared, there stood a woman in a long black cloak. With flowing hair, she had yellow fingernails as sharp as knives and glaring eyes, one green, one blue. Bessie knew her at once for the witch. Did you think you could escape me so easily? She snarled, striding towards the prince. There was a great clap of thunder and a flash of light. When Bessie looked again, both the witch and Prince Alfred had vanished. Stumbling out of the cottage, all she could see were the dark shapes of the trees. I must find the prince, she vowed. Perhaps if I climb a tree, I'll be able to see where he's gone. A great oak tree grew beside the cottage with branches low enough for her to climb. Bessie clambered from branch to branch until she was peeking out over the treetops. There was no sign of the prince, but she did see a light twinkling between the trees not far off. I'll follow the light, she decided. Perhaps it will lead me to someone who can help. So Bessie climbed down from the tree and felt her way through the darkness towards the light. At last she came to a little house with grass growing all around and a pile of wood by the small front door. Bessie bent down and peered through the window. Inside she could see a group of toads. Some were big, some little, and they were sitting at a beautifully laid table, with one toad on the floor. There was a white tablecloth, a dish of roasted meats, and silver cups. Bessie knocked loudly and heard the largest toad call out, Little green toad, get up from the floor, pull back the lock, and open the door. At once the door opened and Bessie stepped inside. The toads all rushed to welcome her. Please sit down, said the largest toad. What are you doing so deep in the woods so late at night? Bessie told them her story about the prince and the iron stove and how the witch had come and whisked him away. Now I don't know where the prince has gone or how I shall ever find him, she finished. Well now, said the largest toad, you have come to the right place, for we are able to help you, but first you must rest. Bessie was given food and then taken to a beautifully made bed with silken covers woven with gold and silver thread. When the next day was dawning, the large toad turned to the little toad again and said, Little green toad, now try your best. Get down from the table and open the chest. The little green toad did just as the big toad asked and threw open a chest that stood in the corner. Out of it the large toad took 6 enormous darning needles, a cartwheel, and 3 nuts. You will need to cross an ice mountain, a field of slashing swords, and a great lake. When you have passed these, you will find the prince again. Take these objects. You can use them to help you on your journey." Bessie thanked the Toads and left with the first light of day. It wasn't long before she came to a towering mountain made of gleaming ice. Bessie tried to climb it, but it was so steep and so slippery that no sooner she had taken a few steps than she slid down again. "I've failed already," she thought. "I'll never rescue the poor prince." Then she remembered the needles the Toads had given her. She pushed 3 into the side of the mountain, placed her foot on them, and began to climb. With each step, she had to pierce the ice with the needles and then pluck them out again. The needles were so sharp they slid in easily, but it was slow work, and the sun was already setting by the time she reached the very top. "At least getting down will be quicker," thought Bessie, and with a whoop she slid all the way down the other side. Bessie camped in a glade that night, for it was too dark to go on. But when morning broke, she saw that beyond her lay the field of slashing swords. The field sloped downwards, stretching endlessly towards the horizon. The swords were closely packed and whirled over the ground, round and round, as if powered by invisible hands. Their blades flashed and dazzled in the sun, and Bessie knew there was no way she could walk across and come out unharmed. Then she remembered the cartwheel the Toads had given her. Plucking up her courage, Bessie balanced on the wheel, arms outstretched, and rolled it through the sword-filled field. It took her all day. By the time she reached the other side, she knew it was too dark to go on. This time she lay down to rest on a sandy beach and went to sleep to the sound of waves lapping against the shore. Plucking up her courage, Bessie balanced on the wheel, arms outstretched, and rolled it through the sword-filled field. The next morning, by the light of dawn, Bessie saw that she was at the edge of a great lake, which seemed as deep and as wide as the sea. Not knowing what else to do, she cracked open the first nut. Inside was a tiny boat, no bigger than a pea. She placed it on the water, where it grew and grew until it was large enough for Bessie to climb inside. She sailed across the lake and landed on the far shore, in the shadow of a magnificent castle. Night was drawing in, but in one of the tower windows a light flickered. Stepping closer, Bessie saw the witch silhouetted against the window. She saw her long flowing hair and her long yellow fingernails. The witch was gazing at herself in a mirror and laughing. Bessie saw her reach for a small glass bottle. The witch gulped down the liquid inside, and a moment later she was transformed into a beautiful young woman. With a smile, she placed a dazzling crown on her head. If the witch is here, then maybe the prince is here too, thought Bessie. I have to find him. Taking a deep breath, Bessie pushed open the great front door and crept into the castle. There was a huge hall and a sweeping staircase, and to her left and right, long narrow corridors that seemed to go on forever. The castle was filled with servants hurrying back and forth, carrying dishes piled high with food. "Excuse me," said Bessie, stopping one of the servants. "Why are you all so rushing off?" The servant looked at her surprised. "We're preparing for the wedding, of course," he said. "The princess is marrying Prince Alfred tonight." "And where is the prince?" asked Bessie. The servant looked around, as if to make sure no one could hear him. Then he bent down to whisper in Bessie's ear. He's sleeping in the topmost tower, he said. He's been sleeping ever since he got here, almost as if he's under a spell. The princess visits him each night, bringing him one of her potions. How would I find my way to the tower? Asked Bessie. At the end of this corridor is a turret staircase. Keep climbing till you reach the very top, the servant whispered, and then he hurried away. Bessie walked the great length of the corridor. When she reached the foot of the staircase,